Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Have you ever heard of an event so pivotal it could light the fuse for a revolution? Today we are diving deep into one such moment, the Boston Massacre. But was it truly a massacre or something far more complex? Let's travel back to the cold, tense streets of colonial Boston and uncover the truth behind the story that changed America forever. The year is 1770. Boston is not a happy place. Imagine your city occupied by a foreign army. That's exactly how many Bostonians felt. Red-coated British soldiers, thousands of them, had been stationed in the city since 1768. Why? To enforce unpopular British laws like the Townshend Acts, which taxed everyday goods like paper, glass, and tea. For the colonists who had no representatives in the British Parliament, this was taxation without representation, and it was infuriating. The presence of these soldiers was a constant source of friction. They were a visible symbol of British authority, and daily life was filled with tension. Soldiers and civilians often competed for jobs, leading to brawls and arguments. Taunts and insults were exchanged constantly. Boston was a powder keg, and on the chilly evening of March 5, 1770, it was about to explode. It all started with a minor dispute. A young wigmaker's apprentice accused a British officer of not paying his bill. The argument escalated, and a British private, Hugh White, who was standing guard at the custom house on King Street, stepped in to defend the officer. He struck the apprentice with his musket. This seemingly small act of violence drew a crowd. Word spread like wildfire through the narrow streets of Boston. Bells began to ring, which was usually a signal for a fire, drawing even more people out of their homes and taverns. A crowd, which grew to several hundred people, gathered around Private White. They were angry, and they weren't quiet about it. They began taunting him, calling him names like Lobsterback because of his red coat. The verbal harassment soon turned physical. The crowd started throwing whatever they could find: snowballs, chunks of ice, oyster shells, and sticks. Overwhelmed and fearing for his safety, Private White called for backup. Captain Thomas Preston, the officer of the day, responded. He marched a small detachment of 7 soldiers from the 29th Regiment of Foot to relieve the besieged sentry. With their bayonets fixed, they pushed their way through the mob to form a protective semicircle around Private White at the custom house steps. But their presence didn't calm the situation. It only enraged the crowd further. The mob pressed in, getting bolder and more aggressive. They dared the soldiers to fire, waving clubs and shouting insults. One person who was there, a rope maker named Samuel Gray, supposedly yelled, "God damn you, you sons of bitches, fire! You can't kill us all." The air was thick with anger and confusion. Captain Preston was reportedly standing in front of his men, trying to de-escalate the situation, ordering the crowd to disperse. Then it happened. A club or a piece of ice flew through the air and struck one of the soldiers, Private Hugh Montgomery, knocking him to the ground as he scrambled. Back up, he was furious and panicked. He yelled, "Damn you, fire," and discharged his musket into the crowd. For a moment there was a stunned silence. Then, after a brief, confused pause, the other soldiers opened fire. It was a chaotic volley, not a coordinated command. Captain Preston would later swear he never gave the order to fire. But in the heat of the moment, with the noise, the projectiles, and the fear, the soldiers acted on instinct. When the smoke cleared, the scene was horrific. 11 people had been hit. 3 men lay dead or dying in the snow-covered street. Crispus Attucks, a sailor of mixed African and Native American descent, was one of the first to fall, becoming a legendary figure and often cited as the first casualty of the American Revolution. Samuel Gray, the rope maker, and a mariner named James Caldwell were also killed instantly. 2 others, Samuel Maverick and Patrick Carr, would die from their wounds in the following days. 6 more were injured but survived. The sound of gunfire echoed through Boston, and the city teetered on the brink of all-out war. The crowd, momentarily shocked, grew even larger and more furious. The acting governor, Thomas Hutchinson, had to be called to the scene. He managed to address the mob from the balcony of the old State House, promising a full and fair inquiry and urging them to go home. Reluctantly, the crowd dispersed, but the anger remained. The very next day, Boston was in an uproar. A massive town meeting demanded The immediate removal of all British troops from the city to prevent further bloodshed, Governor Hutchinson agreed. The soldiers were withdrawn to Castle Island, a fortress in Boston Harbor. The immediate crisis was averted, but the damage was done. Now came the question of justice. Captain Preston, his 8 soldiers, and 4 civilians were arrested and charged with murder. This was a monumental moment. How could the British soldiers possibly get a fair trial in a city that hated them? Who would be brave enough to defend them? Enter John Adams. Yes, that John Adams, the future second president of the United States and a passionate patriot. It might seem shocking, but Adams, along with another lawyer, Josiah Quincy JRB, agreed to take the case. Why? Because Adams believed deeply in the right to a fair trial and the rule of law. He knew that if the colonists couldn't provide justice even to their enemies, their own fight for liberty would be meaningless. It was an unpopular and risky move, but a principled one. The trials were sensational. The prosecution, led by Samuel Quincy and Robert Treat Paine, argued that the soldiers had fired maliciously into an unarmed crowd, but John Adams mounted a brilliant defense. He argued that the soldiers were acting in self-defense. He painted a vivid picture of the chaos and fear of that night, describing the mob as a dangerous and unruly group that had provoked the soldiers beyond measure. He famously argued, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." Adams methodically cross-examined witnesses, highlighting the confusion and conflicting accounts of what happened. He made the jury see the event not from the comfort of the courtroom, but from the terrifying perspective of the soldiers, surrounded and under attack. His strategy worked. After a thorough trial, the jury acquitted Captain Preston. In a separate trial for the soldiers, 6 of them were also found not guilty, 2, including Hugh Montgomery. The first to fire were found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter, not murder. Their punishment? Instead of execution, they were branded on the thumb with the letter M for manslaughter, a common practice at the time, and then discharged from the army. Legally, justice had been served, at least according to the court. But in the court of public opinion, the verdict was very different. Leaders of the Patriot cause, like Samuel Adams, John Adams's cousin, were masters of propaganda. They weren't going to let the facts get in the way of a good story. They immediately framed the event not as a chaotic riot that ended in tragedy, but as a deliberate and brutal massacre of innocent citizens by tyrannical soldiers. The most famous piece of propaganda was an engraving created by Paul Revere. You've probably seen it. It's titled "The Bloody Massacre Perpetrated in King Street," but Revere's depiction is wildly inaccurate. It shows a calm, organized line of British soldiers firing on a small, peaceful and unarmed group of citizens on the direct order of their smug-looking captain. The soldiers look evil, the victims look innocent. There's even a little dog, adding to the sense of domestic peace being shattered. It's a masterpiece of political spin. The custom house is even labeled Butcher's Hall. This powerful image was printed and distributed all across the 13 colonies. It inflamed anti-British sentiment everywhere. It turned a complex, tragic event into a simple, powerful story of British tyranny and colonial victimhood. The Boston Massacre became a rallying cry for patriots. It was used for years to fuel the fires of revolution, reminding colonists of the dangers of a standing army and the brutality of British rule. So, was it a massacre? By the dictionary definition, the killing of a number of helpless or unresisting people, perhaps not. It was a riot that spiraled out of control. But in the context of the growing revolutionary movement, the name was a stroke of genius. It transformed the event into a symbol that was far more powerful than the event itself. The Boston Massacre stands as a crucial turning point on the road to the American Revolution. It showed that the tension between Britain and its colonies could no longer be contained by words alone, and that blood could and would be shed. 5 years later, the first shots of the Revolutionary War would be fired at Lexington and Concord, and the memory of the bloody massacre on King Street would be in the minds of many who fought for independence. It's a powerful reminder of how history is not just what happens, but also how it is told, remembered, and used. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Boston Massacre. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that shaped our world. And let me know in the comments, do you think what happened was a massacre or something else? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.